right, you guys, welcome back to the channel. So excited to have you here today. So today we are talking about the fact that the Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments in the Scametti versus the U.S. case. Now, if you're unfamiliar, this case basically is ruling on the state's rights to ban child transitioning. So obviously the psychopaths are up in arms over this, and the sane people are saying, ban that shit. So let's get into it. But before we do, this is your reminder to subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. If you are listening on Spotify, leave me a rating and a review over there. I greatly appreciate it. All of my other social medias are linked down below, as always, with a special note today that TikTok is likely going to get deleted. I honestly don't care. Hate that app. But check out my Instagram. Make sure you are subscribed to me here. If you like my content, support me on other platforms. Because honestly, even if the app itself does not get deleted, your girl likely will, because I'm always getting content removed over there. So with all of that, my God. My name's Noelle. This is Just Say No. Let's dive right in. Okay, so first things first, you guys already know my thoughts on this. We've talked about this extensively on this channel, but this Supreme Court case gives us a really excellent opportunity, I think, to kind of outline the case for banning childhood transitioning in one neat, beautiful bow. It's Christmas. Here's a present, right? Send this to somebody who disagrees. I suppose if we're going to do this, we will start with the string of investigations that went into Vanderbilt back in 2022, because that kind of, it's a good jumping off spot. It's a lot of dominoes start to fall around this time in regards to this ideology. The clinic itself opened in 2018, and around that time, a doctor named Shane Taylor gave a lecture discussing the different types of procedures that would be offered at this new clinic. And I'm going to play that clip for you here because it's very clear that from the very beginning of this, it was about profit and not helping people whatsoever, especially children, my God.
Starting in January 1st of 2017, according to the Affordable Care Act, insurance carriers are mandated to cover medical expenses for trans folks. Some of our BUMC financial folks in October of 2016, started a couple of years ago, put down some costs of how much money we think each patient would bring in. And this is only including top surgery. This isn't including any bottom surgery. And it's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000. A patient just on routine hormone treatment, who I'm only seeing a few times a year, can bring in several $1,000s. That requires a lot of visits and labs. It actually makes money for the hospital. Now, these I got from the internet, but it's from the Philadelphia Center for Transgender Surgery, which does a lot of surgery for patients. And I just want to give you an idea of how much these bottom surgeries are making. And I think this has to be an underestimate. This is for a vaginoplasty. They're quoting roughly around $20,000 for a vaginoplasty, but that doesn't include your hospital stay. That doesn't include your post-op visits. That doesn't include your anesthesia, your OR. So I would think that this has to be a gross underestimate. I think that's just like the surgeon's piece of it, which anybody who's ever been in the hospital knows that that's like 10% of it. And then the female to male bottom surgeries, these are huge money makers. Again, I think this has to be an underestimate that they're quoting around $20,000 for a phalloplasty. There's been different things that I've read that said it could be up to $100,000. Dr. Winokur, who's our surgeon, says that there's entire clinics where the entire clinic is supported just by their phalloplasties, and that is like a fraction of the surgeries that they're doing. These surgeries are labor intensive, they require a lot of follow-ups, they require a lot of OR time, and they make money. They make money for the hospital.
They make money. They're profitable, and that is the bottom line. That is the thing that they care about. They do not care about patient care. They do not care about trying to help these children. Keep in mind, follow the money. Oh my God. Anytime there's any scandal ever in the history, anything, follow the money. Follow the money. And if you follow the money here, It's very clear that this is profit driven. This is not patient care driven. They do not care about these children. Okay? They don't. And that's going to become exceedingly clear throughout this video. Now, of course, to be fair, they are a hospital. They do have to think about the profit. They do have to think about these things in order to stay in business. It's just pretty sick, right? To consider the fact that they are looking at lopping the breasts off a 15-year-old girl as just a bottom line, a way to make money. She's going to have to come back in. There's a lot of follow-up for that surgery, this surgery, that surgery. They're going to be coming back in. Oh, the OR time, the anesthesia. My God, it's sickening. And frankly, this is indicative of the medical system at large. Big hospitals are predatory, period. And I think that just proves my point even further as to why we trust them when they say that it is necessary to medically intervene in these kids' lives. I don't know about you guys, but especially after COVID, I have become quite hesitant when I hear any medical professional say, oh, this is medically necessary. Now, sometimes it's true. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here, but use some critical thinking here. I don't think that it's medically necessary to put a 15-year-old on cross-sex hormones under any circumstance. You know what I'm saying? So have some discretion, I guess, is all I'm asking for. So another video that came out of this Vanderbilt investigation was another doctor, I believe that she is a plastic surgeon, discussing hormone treatments that can start at the age of 14. And what's fascinating about this clip is that at the end of it, she makes the point that you have to discuss fertility preservation treatments with these young patients, essentially admitting they know that this leaves children sterile. Oh my God. We're going to get into it more, so I'm trying not to let out all my agitation at once. Let's just check out this clip.
We can provide gender-affirming hormones on an individual who is on a pubertal blocker, depending on whatever kind of blocker they've chosen or we have discussed with them, or they can present to us at a later stage of puberty, and then we provide the gender-affirming hormones. Previously, the Endocrine Society recommended to start these at age 16, but we all know that would be delayed puberty, right? Not 16-year-olds don't start puberty. So more recently, they did update that to say as early as 14 for compelling reasons. So we have some individuals who have started gender-affirming hormones at 13 or 14 to be more like their peers. Again, fertility preservation and consent are very important to discuss prior to any initiation of these.
To expect a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old to think far enough into the future to give informed consent as to losing the ability to conceive children is so beyond retarded that I actually don't have a word for it. One thing, if nothing else, that children at that age are not known for, it is planning ahead, right? Thinking about the future is not really the thing that they are primarily focused on. And so to expect them to go against what comes naturally to them, which is to be living in the exact moment that they're in and no further than that whatsoever, in a serious enough manner to say to themselves, I obviously don't want kids right now because I'm 13 and that's crazy. But when I'm 26, I might want to be a mother. I might want to have children. And so I should probably look into this a little bit. To expect them to have that wherewithal, I mean, it sounds insane coming out of my mouth, but that's what they're expecting them to do. That is what they're expecting them to do. That, and they're expecting their parents to have that conversation with them. But I come back to, I'm sorry. If children that age are not good at thinking into the future, the thing that they are second worst at is listening to their parents for the most part. Especially considering the fact that children that are in this situation are troubled. I mean, you're not going to have a stable child finding themselves in this kind of a situation. And troubled children, I don't know, just typically speaking, are even less likely to listen to their parents. So it's just like this vicious, horrible cycle that is being perpetuated by freaks who want money and want to profit off of the suffering of our children. And I really want to emphasize that. If you support this, you're a fucking freak, okay? You're a freak. Okay, so the next clip that we are going to look at, again, all of this is coming out of the Vanderbilt investigation, and I misspoke earlier. The clip that we just watched was not a plastic surgeon speaking. It was just somebody who works at the clinic or is familiar with their practices, I believe. This is the clip from the plastic surgeon, and she is going to be discussing the potential surgeries that these children can receive. Now, the reason we are going to play this is because they are pulling information from WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and they basically set the standards of care. That's what they do. They set their standards of care. So when a doctor is trying to help a child who has gender dysphoria, they look to the WPATH to see like what are the steps, what are the guidelines, the rules, the regulations. Essentially, that is their job. And what we're going to get into it today, but they have also collapsed and found to be completely fraudulent. Shocker. But for now, let's play this clip, because if you think that it can't get more disturbing, it does.
So when we talk about the WPATH guidelines, so in order for our patients to really successfully undergo these surgeries, we do, again, follow these guidelines. So a lot of times it's for insurance purposes, but again, insurances kind of follow suit with the WPATH guidelines for the most part. So for any kind of top surgery, we do require one letter of persistent, well-documented gender dysphoria by a licensed mental health provider.
Okay, so I do want to take this one at a time, because when these are presented in the way in which they are presenting it, it kind of seems like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But when you tear it apart and actually look at the methodology that goes into each of these, it's not quite that simple. So one letter of persistent, well-documented gender dysphoria by a licensed mental health professional. So the problem with that is that they have taken away therapists' abilities to say, I don't think you have gender dysphoria. I think that there are underlying issues here that I would like to look at. That will get your license revoked these days. So therapists are kind of backed into a wall and don't really have any other choice but to write a letter stating, yes, this person has gender dysphoria. And it happens very quickly. You just need to have one visit with one therapist for 30 minutes, and they will get you that letter and you will be on your way. So this isn't as if you have to spend 2 years in therapy, really digging through your own baggage, really getting to the root of what's causing your issues, and see if you still have these troubles, this gender dysphoria. See if that is still something that you are struggling with. That is not at all what's happening. Not at all.
We ensure that the patient is capable of making fully informed decisions on their own. They're the age of majority. However, for a lot of our younger patients, again, if they are 16, 17, here at Vanderbilt, if they have been on testosterone, have a parental consent, we're able to do a lot of the top surgeries for those patients.
Okay. So I wanted them to take those two at kind of together, because they really do go hand in hand. Patient has the capacity to make a fully informed decision. We're talking about children. I feel like it's almost overstated or overused, but there are many things that we do not let children do. Drink, drive, get a tattoo, get a piercing, join the army, own a gun. My God, they have to be accompanied by an adult to go see a rated R movie, okay? But we just think that they can fully consent to having their breasts chopped off. Make it make sense. Make that make sense. I will wait. Now, they say the age of majority, so in some states that would be 17, and they say sometimes it's 16, but we all know that this has been happening as young as 15. And then finally, the last one is, if significant medical or mental health concerns are present, they must be reasonably well controlled. Like, what the f*** does that even mean? See, this goes in with the first one of needing that letter from a mental health professional. The mental health professional is not allowed to address other mental health concerns, not in any serious manner. We've all heard affirmative therapy, right? That's kind of the new great buzzword, but it needs to be recognized that affirmative therapy is not therapy. Your therapist is not there to affirm you. That is literally antithetical to their job. Their job is to be honest, okay? And if you're being crazy, it is their job to tell you that you're being crazy. It is not their job to say, yeah, Susie, I totally understand where you're coming from. That's what your best friend is for. That's not the job of your therapist. And therapists are not allowed at this present time to say, I don't think you have gender dysphoria. I think that there's a lot of other things going on, which would be these serious mental health issues that they are referring to in that last bullet point. Not allowed. They're not allowed to do that. But this is why there was an investigation put into them, right? So when I say that this investigation was the kind of cornerstone in this Supreme Court case, it is because Vanderbilt is in Tennessee, and when all of this came out, Tennessee banned childhood transitioning because the evidence for it being beneficial is essentially non-existent, right? And then the Tennessee AG took it to the Supreme Court saying, this is an infringement on civil rights, which is complete horseshit. I mark my words, in 15 years, if not less, we are going to look back on these medicalizations of children with the same scrutiny that we look at lobotomies with. We're going to be like, what in the living fuck were we thinking? Were they thinking, I don't want to be lumped in with them? Baby, my hands are clean. Do not want to be lumped in. But speaking of evidence, let's look at some. Okay, so there was a 2008 study and a 2013 study that both showed that the majority of children who experience gender dysphoria desist as they reach adulthood, meaning the symptoms of gender dysphoria that they experienced as a child no longer present as an adult. And to boil that down even more, if we leave these kids alone, if we do not, let me be more specific, not necessarily leave them alone because they need help, but if we do not medicalize them, if we do not propel them down this route of lifelong medicalization, they will grow out of it. And if they don't, they can transition when they are an adult and able to make that decision. So specifically, the 2008 study found that only 2.5% to 20% of children who experience gender dysphoria continue to feel it into adulthood. And that was corroborated by the 2013 study, which found that in a study conducted over decades, over 84% of those children desisted. So you have one study that shows very, very few continue to experience gender dysphoria into adulthood, combined with another study that show the mass majority no longer feel it in adulthood, right? Another study from 2021 discussed 4 separate studies. So I can't think of the word right now. There is a word for it, but it combined 4 separate studies into this one study and took the average and found that the average of all 4 of these studies looking at teenage boys, only 17% on average persisted into adulthood. So that falls right in line with the 2008 study and the 2013 study. And then they conducted their own study independent of the studies that they looked at and found that only 12% persisted while 88% desisted from their childhood dysphoria. So what does this tell us right off of the bat? That if left alone, meaning not given puberty blockers, not socially transitioning, none of this, the vast majority of children will grow out of it. And I want you to ask yourself this: what is the motivation here? Why? If we have so much evidence that shows that children will in fact grow out of this, why are they so hell-bent on forcing children down this permanent path of medicalization? Money. Follow the money. Always. Always. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there are some just willful retards out there who refuse to look at any other information and think that they are doing the right thing and want to virtue signal to the high heavens. But you're evil. This is demonic. I mean, truly, I really hate to use that word because it's so strong, but if I'm going to use it, it's going to be in this context. It's demonic. If you thought we were done, you were wrong. If you're mad, you're not mad enough. Let's look at this from the NIH. My God, we love 3-letter agencies. So they did a study themselves. And The results of such study were 1 qualitative study, 2 case studies, 5 quantitative studies, 5 ethical discussions, and 22 editorials were assessed. That's a lot of information coming in, isn't it? Quantitative studies were all poor quality, with 83% of 251 participants reported as desisting. 30 definitions of desistance were found, with 4 overarching trends: desistance as the disappearance of gender dysphoria after puberty, a change in gender identity from TGE to cisgender, the disappearance of distress, and the disappearance of the desire for medical intervention. So essentially, they looked at the information, the NIH, Dr. Fauci, and found that these studies that were done were poor, like they were not good quality studies, or they proved the point that I'm making. But what was the conclusions that they drew from this? Well, you see here, the conclusion that they drew was this review demonstrates the dearth of high-quality hypothesis-driven research that currently exists and suggests that desistance should no longer be used in clinical work or research. This transition can help future research move away from attempting to predict gender outcomes and instead focus on helping reduce distress from GD and TGE children. So despite finding the same evidence that all the other studies found, which is, if left alone, children will grow out of it, they're saying, hey, we should just throw our hands up and stop looking into it, because every time we look into it, we get proven wrong and we can't make any money from that. You mad yet? I'm mad. And what's insane is if you look at different studies that show children who were medicalized, these numbers invert and show that 97% of children who are given puberty blockers continue on to cross-sex hormones. So where in one study you were seeing anywhere from 80 to 90% of children growing out of their gender dysphoria, the moment that you introduce puberty blockers, that number completely inverts, and now that child is put on a path that they will most likely regret. Now, it is worth noting that there are no long-term studies on children who have transitioned. Even for the best of them, there's one that started in 2013, so now they are adults, but they've only been on cross-sex hormones for a few years, which all studies concur that the first few years, especially for female to male, are almost euphoric, because the effects that testosterone has on the female body, it essentially gives you like a false sense of euphoria, and it is a very nice feeling, but it does not last. And so this is what the NIH was saying, is that there are no good quality studies, meaning no long-term ones. There's just not information. So for people who sit there and tell you this is not experimental, they're liars. I don't know what else to tell you. They are either liars or they're fucking brain dead, because there is no information about this. And to be medicalizing children in this way when we know so little about it is so barbaric. I can't even wrap my head around it, and I come back to it being demonic. But once again, I say follow the money. By introducing children to medicalization young, they are almost guaranteeing, in fact, they are all but guaranteeing that child is going to continue down medicalization. You start with puberty blockers, and then you get them on cross-sex hormones, and then maybe you get a double mastectomy or a vaginoplasty or whatever they're called. And then that is continual checkups, and you need to get your prescription refilled, and you're constantly in the doctor's office now, and now you are a lifelong patient. And I just simply cannot wrap my head around why people are so hell bent on that option, instead of saying, let us exhaust every other possible solution, right? Like, that should be the absolute last resort, and it has become the first option. I mean, the first option is puberty blockers. Well, let's just get them on puberty blockers just in case. No, fuck you. You're a demon. Or not, we haven't even looked at the worst of it, because we have not talked about WPATH yet. We mentioned them earlier, but we did not look into their scandal, so let's dive into that. So as I said, they provide essentially the standard of care for these children, right? And, well, unfortunately, earlier this year, I believe it was, some things got leaked from WPATH, and it just did not look good for them. So Maya Hughes did a full in-depth analysis of the leaks that came out of WPATH. I will link that down below. It is 250 pages long. So it's quite the undertaking. We're going to look at a couple of pages out of this because essentially the scandal here cannot be understated. I need that to be known. What is meant to be a scientific, evidence-based organization is nothing more than a group of activists who are just trying to push forward their given agenda. So here is the report. We are going to skip to page 10 because these are the two most important sections, in my opinion. WPATH knows children do not understand the effects of hormone therapy. In video, we're starting right here, in video footage obtained by Environmental Progress of an internal WPATH panel entitled Identity Evolution Workshop held on May 6th, 2022, panel members admit to the impossibility of getting proper informed consent for hormonal interventions from their young patients. During the panel, Dr. Daniel Metzger, a Canadian endocrinologist, discussed the challenges faced when attempting to obtain consent from adolescents seeking this medical treatment. Metzger reminded those assembled that gender doctors are often explaining these sorts of things to people who haven't even had biology in high school yet, adding that even adult patients have very little medical understanding of the effects of these interventions. Metzger describes young patients attempting to pick and choose the physical effects of hormone therapy, with some wanting a deeper voice without facial hair or to take estrogen without developing breasts. This suggests a very poor understanding of the workings of the human body and the treatment pathway on part of an adolescent patient. Quote, "It's hard to kind of pick and choose the effects that you want," concluded Metzger. "It's something that kids normally wouldn't understand because they haven't had biology yet. But I think a lot of adults are, well, hoping to be able to get X without getting Y, and that's not always possible." Metzger tells his young patients that they might not be binary, but hormones are binary. Well, I can imagine that. He describes having to explain to children and even adults that you can't get a deeper voice without probably a bit of a beard, and you can't get estrogen to feel more feminine without some breast development. There was agreement among the panel of experts about children's inability to comprehend the powerful and life-altering effects of the hormone therapy they are seeking. Another prominent WPATH member, Diane Berg, a child psychologist and co-author of the child chapter of SOC 8, chimed in to say that they wouldn't expect children and young adolescents to grasp the effects of the treatment because it's out of their developmental range to understand the extent to some of these medical interventions are impacting them. The immaturity of these patients was further demonstrated when Berg said, quote, "They'll say they understand, but then they'll say something else that makes you think, oh, they didn't really understand that. They are going to have facial hair." Yet, publicly, WPATH never discusses any of this. On the rare occasion that WPATH makes public statements, sex trait modification interventions are presented as age-appropriate, essential medical care, and any opposition to such interventions is framed as transphobia. So that's demonic. I mean, my God. Oh my God. I know that this is a lot right now, but it is so important. And these are the only two sections we're going to look at out of this particular study. So we are going to also look at this one. WPATH knows children cannot consent to iatrogenic fertility loss. Another crucial aspect of the informed consent process that these WPATH members confess is being violated is the issue of allowing minors to consent to a treatment pathway that could result in sterility. WPATH's SOC 8 stipulates that doctors must inform the young person, okay, funny way of saying child, about the potential loss of fertility and available options to preserve fertility. By advocating for adolescents in early puberty to have access to hormonal interventions that could leave them sterile, the world-leading transgender health group is implying that minors have the cognitive capacity to make such a decision about their future. However, on the inside, prominent WPATH members confess that it is impossible for adolescents to understand the gravity of the decision. Dr. Ren Massey, a psychologist and co-author of the adolescence chapter of the latest standards of care, told the panel that according to SOC 8, quote, it's encouraged and ethical to talk about fertility preservation treatments, stressing that it is even important for youths who are going on puberty blockers because many of those youth will go directly onto affirming hormone therapies, which will eliminate the development of their gonads producing sperm or eggs, a function that the young person, child, may desire. Quote, if they want to be partners with someone else later in contributing genetic material for reproduction. Metzger, we talked about him earlier, responded that, quote, it's always a good theory that you talk about fertility preservation with a 14-year-old, but I know I'm talking to a blank wall. Adding, they'd be like, ew, kids, babies, gross. Or the usual answer is, I'm just going to adopt. And then you ask them, well, do you know what that involves? Like, how much does it cost? And yada. All of this demonstrates they know. They know exactly what they are doing. They know these children can't consent. They know these children are out of their depths, out of their understanding, do not possess the cognitive ability to comprehend the information that is being given to them, and they do it anyways. Why? Say it with me. Money. Money. M-O-N-E-Y. Money, 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 money. It's evil. It's absolutely evil. So again, that one will be linked down below if you want to check it out. There is a lot of other and really incredible information in that report. We just do not have time to get into all of it today because we still have so much to go over. Again, like I said, I wanted to wrap this up in a nice freaking bow so you can send it to the person who's going to call you a transphobe for watching this video. In the most demented, the most demonic part of all of this is that none of this really matters. Everything we just discussed can be washed away simply by the other side because they're just going to say, it's life-saving. Would you rather have an alive son or a dead daughter? Demonic. If anyone ever had the gall to look at me and tell me that my child was going to die if I didn't do a certain medical intervention that was not actually life-saving, baby, we are gonna tussle. Meet me outside. We're gonna tussle. Because that is like the most cruel level of manipulation to tell a parent. Most parents are working, right? They don't have time to be doing the bullshit research that I am doing. They don't have the time to read these books and these studies because they're working and taking care of their kids. And so there are parents who, have this expectation that they should be able to trust their medical professionals. And when they are told, hey, if you don't do this, your kid's going to fucking kill themselves. Yeah, that's going to strike fear into most parents, isn't it? It's pretty demonic. Especially when it's false. Especially when you consider the fact that it's just not true. The reality is medicalization does not reduce the suicidality in this group of people because they're not doing anything to address the thing that's actually causing the suicidality. Let me give you an example. There are a certain number of children who experience gender dysphoria due to some sort of sexual abuse that they experienced in their childhood, in their early development. And putting that kid on hormones is not going to do anything to help them cope with the trauma of being sexually abused. That's gruesome. That's terrible to have to talk about. And isn't it terrible that we have to talk about it? But we do. We must, because there are those who are insisting, oh, my daughter, she likes to play with trucks and she loves the color blue and she doesn't like to wear dresses. And so she's probably a little boy. And don't bother thinking, well, did something happen to her to make her incredibly uncomfortable in the way that her body is and makes her want to be somebody entirely different? Just, things to consider. But you're not allowed to consider it. In fact, I'm a transphobe for even suggesting that you consider it. And let me make this clear. If my kid came to me or a medical professional came to me and told me that my child was going to kill themselves if I didn't give in to X, Y, or Z, my initial reaction isn't going to be to cave into that desire. My initial reaction is going to be, what happened? What is going on in your life right now that makes you want to make this drastic of a change? You know, I'm going to want to get to the root of it, look a little bit deeper, maybe. And then I would do the absolute unthinkable. I would put them in therapy. Real therapy. None of this affirmative bullshit we talked about earlier. No. They're going to sit down with a professional, right? They're going to answer questions. They're going to look inward a little bit. We're going to get to the bottom of it. And let me also just say, if your child is threatening to end their life, you as the parent have every single right to intervene to whatever extent necessary to prevent such a thing from happening. If you have to put them in a hospital, then you have to put them in a hospital. If you have to spend every single second with them, handcuff their wrist to your wrist to prevent them from harming themselves, then you have to do that. You have to do whatever you need to do to protect your child. But do not get it mistaken. Putting them on a lifelong course of medicalization is not protecting them. We're going to look at one more study because we must. So back in 2020, there was an independent study that was commissioned back in England called the CAST study. This recently wrapped up actually this year. And because of this study, the largest gender clinic in the UK, Tavistock, closed. It got shut down because of this study. So let's take a look. So the full report was published this year, as I said, and these were a few of the key findings. Once again, I will link this study in its entirety down below if you want to take a look, but these are some of the key findings. The rationale for early puberty suppression remains unclear, with weak evidence regarding the impact on gender dysphoria, mental or psychosocial health. The effect on cognitive and psychosexual development remains unknown. So, as I said, medical intervention is not in fact proven to improve suicidality. Next, there is no simple explanation for the increase in the numbers of predominantly young people and young adults who have trans or gender diverse identity. They continue on to say that it's a combination of psychological, biological, and social. I would say let's put a heavy emphasis on social, shall we? Next, they say, while a considerable amount of research has been published in this field, systematic evidence reviews demonstrates the poor quality of the published studies, meaning there is not a reliable evidence base upon which to make clinical decisions or for children and families to make informed choices. As I said earlier, these studies that are done in favor of child transitioning are dog shit. The use of masculinizing/feminizing hormones in those under the age of 18 also presents many unknowns despite their long-standing use in the adult transgender population. The lack of long-term follow-up data on those commencing treatment at an early age means we have an inadequate information about the range of outcomes for this group. And I'm sorry to keep saying this, but this is exactly what I was saying. There are no long-term studies in the studies that we have. Say it with me. Dog shit. Next, clinicians are unable to determine with any certainty which children and young people will go on to have an enduring trans identity. And finally, they say for the majority of young people, a medical pathway may not be the best way to manage their gender-related distress. For those young people for whom a medical pathway is clinically indicated, it is not enough to provide this without also addressing wider mental health and or psychosocial challenging problems. This, in case it's like going over your head, look deeper first. Don't put them on drugs immediately. Let's talk. They also have a list of recommendations, and one stuck out to me. It says, quote, Children/young people referred to NHS Gender Services must receive a holistic assessment of their needs to inform an individualized care plan. This should include screening for neurodevelopmental conditions, including autism spectrum disorder, and a mental health assessment. Why this approach is being fought? Money. I couldn't tell you. Money. But essentially what that's saying is, hey, like, let's examine this child head to toe before we medicalize them. And I feel like a broken record because I think I've said that about 2,000 times in this episode alone. But the amount of people who think that that is like transphobic or hateful to say such a thing, it's actually bonkers. And they need help because they're demons. They need to be exorcised, I think. So I bring all of this up again because I wanted to have like a really nice analysis, and I think we did an excellent job, you guys. Thank you for sticking with me. But the reason we're doing all of this is because the Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments because, as I said at the top of the episode, the case coming out of Tennessee was brought to the Supreme Court. And it is looking like the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of the states having the right to ban childhood transitioning. But it could be who knows how long before we get that ruling. They just heard oral arguments. I think it was the 4th of December that happened. So we are probably still a good ways away from getting that ruling. But whenever we do, maybe I'll just repost this episode or whatever. Who knows? It's chock full of good information. And I stand by the fact that we are going to look back on this conversation the same way we look back on things like lobotomies. It is barbaric what we are doing to these children. But if you guys stuck it out this far, give yourselves a round of applause. I know sometimes my episodes can be grueling. I'm aware. I get carried away in the research of it all, but I'm convinced that it will help someone out there. So if that is you, give this video a thumbs up, and thank you for listening to the whole thing. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. I upload episodes every single Monday and Thursday, so you never want to miss anything. All right, you guys, I will talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.